Join us right now from tomorrow, the land of Australia. A guest is here today to celebrate his new cookbook. It's called Healthy Food for Healthy Kids. 120 simple, nourishing, gluten and dairy-free recipes your whole family will love. Please welcome to the show internationally renowned chef, restaurateur, podcaster, Pete Evans. Hey, Pete, how are you?
Hey Jed, I'm doing awesome. Thank you for having me, and hello everybody, or g'day, as the Aussies say.
There you go. Boy, oh boy, I almost ran out of breath giving your introduction there. All those, and I only used half of what's on your website.
Yeah, I've had a bit of a career, that's
Yeah.
for sure. Professional chef, host of a lot of TV shows here in Australia, and also with PBS for 8 years, a beautiful TV show called Movable Feast, where I got to travel pretty much the length and breadth of the United States and cook with some of the most well-known chefs of the United States, and it was a beautiful show. We got to visit farms, go fishing, go to farmers markets, go to the shops where the chefs would get their produce from, and then we'd put on a feast. I'd do a recipe or two, the chef would do a recipe or two. Actually, there would be two chefs in each episode, plus myself. And so I got to see the most beautiful side of the United States food industry, if you want to call it the industry, but some amazing chefs and amazing farms. And you were blessed with some wonderful produce over there by some beautiful artisans.
Yeah, we are very blessed here in the States. I'm wondering, did that show take you up to the Northeast, up to around Boston where we are?
I did, yeah. I had a great time in Boston, Maine, New York. I had, yeah, just Connecticut I went to as well. It was very, very special for me. And also further down south on the East Coast and Charleston. I think if I'm pronouncing these these places right and I got my geography right, it's a bit of a whirlwind. But yeah, I have fond memories of the seafood out of Boston, that's for sure.
Yes, indeed. We do have some great seafood. Boy, there's nothing like seafood that is right out of the ocean. I was down touring and performing in El Salvador last year, and we on the menu it said basically it said fish from the Gulf, and it
Mm.
was like whatever we caught that morning, and it just was spectacular.
How good is it? It's one of those things, as a species, we used to hunt and gather,
Mhm.
and probably not too many people, as a percentage of the population, hunt anymore, and perhaps even gather. But I've been a fisherman. My first book, I've written th over 30 cookbooks now, and my first book was simply titled Fish. And it really showcased beautiful Australian seafood. And I traveled the length and breadth of Australia to showcase all the beautiful different species. And I don't even think I put a dent in it, a dent. I don't know how you pronounce that, but a dent in it. Because as you know, the ocean and the streams and the lakes and the rivers are just teeming with so many beautiful seafoods. And yeah, the variety that we have access to these days, as opposed to when we just used to hunt or fish and gather,
Mhm.
is extraordinary. And that's why I guess there's such a plethora of cookbooks out there because we have such a variety, a smorgasbord, so to speak, of different ingredients that we can access these days, thanks to modern technology, thanks to travel, thanks to shipping, thanks to
Mhm.
all of these things. And what I'm so excited about, and I think most people are as well, that love home cooking and professional cooking, is the access to not only the different ingredients that we have from around the world, the herbs, the spices, but also the different cultures and their recipes that they've developed over millennia that have stood the test of time and have become signature dishes for these countries or these regions. And there's no reason why we can't adopt these beautiful, inspiring recipes and go on this wonderful adventure for the rest of our lives where we probably never have to cook the same thing twice if we choose not to.
That's awesome. You know, here on Reading with Your Kids, one of the hopes, of course, of the podcast is to encourage families to read together. But I'm a firm believer that when you start reading with your kids, that's going to lead to cooking with your kids and playing ball with your kids and watching TV and all those other great things with your kids. And so I'm excited to be able to celebrate this book because I think it sounds like there are 120 recipes that you can prepare with your kids.
100%. And as a father of two grown-up children now, my daughters are 18 and one turns 20 tomorrow. Um,
Congratulations.
some of our fondest memories and my fondest memories, and hopefully theirs too, is spending time around the kitchen bench from a very young age. And not only introducing new foods, which is part of the ritual or the initiation of being human, and as a parent, passing that on to your children, but also the collaboration that you can foster and encourage, educating your children. And it doesn't need to be militant style. It can be fun, it can be joyous, it can be a celebration. Just the simple fact of them cracking their first egg into a bowl that they're going to whisk with a fork or a whisk to turn
Mhm,
into an omelette or scrambled eggs, or them going out to the garden or to the pot plants that have the, as you say, herbs growing, and
mhm,
picking some basil or some parsley or whatever is growing, whatever you can grow, depends on the time of the year and what you love to grow, and then bringing them in and then either tearing them up to go through that omelette or to go into a curry or whatever dish that you're making as a family. And I think those precious memories and those introductions hold a very special weight. And I don't think they can ever be underestimated at how special that is, to be able to surround your children with the gift and the pleasure of preparing food together, and then not only preparing it but then consuming it
mhm.
together in a beautiful setting. And I wrote in one of my cookbooks that, you know, my children, and hopefully they're not the only children, but we have never shared a meal where, let me rephrase that, we've never had a meal that we haven't shared together
Mhm.
in their 18 and 20 years of life. We've always eaten the meals together, and they haven't gone off to their bedrooms to watch television or to be on their phones. It wasn't so much that's a rule in the house. It just, we created that routine and that habit that it was never questioned.
Mhm.
And I'm going down to see my daughters today, actually. That they live in Sydney, and I'm looking forward to sharing another meal with them either tonight or tomorrow morning when I get to catch up with them.
That is awesome. I agree. That time sitting around the table eating, it's a gift, and I hope all the families listening take advantage of that because it's a great time to come together to chat about the day, chat about books that you're reading, and chat about what you're going to cook tomorrow because this was so delicious.
Uh, Agree, 100% agree. And when we think back to our own childhood, I'm sure we have memories of either mum or dad or grandparents or our guardians or having friends over and sharing a meal together. And just, it doesn't need to be complicated.
Hmm.
That's what I'd like to emphasize, unless you choose to make it complicated. Everybody is at a different level of their cooking um, adventure, as I like
Hmm.
to call it. I like to call it an adventure. A lot of
Yeah.
people see cooking as a chore, and I would like to invite anybody that does believe that cooking is a chore to perhaps take a moment and reprioritize or use a different language. As I said, it's an adventure, and as you beautifully mentioned, it's a gift. And I do believe that cooking does not need to be a chore, that it can be a celebration and something that we look forward to doing each and every day. If we choose to eat every day, as obviously our children do, but as
Uh-huh.
adults, we could actually go for periods of time without eating, which is called fasting or intermittent fasting, where we might skip a meal each day or every once a week or something like that. Our bodies are designed for feast and also famine. And as adults, you know, it, my wife and I actually run cooking retreats, but we also run fasting retreats where we invite people not to eat for a period of time, which is sort of counterintuitive coming to a chef's retreat and not being offered food. But it's nice to step out of our comfort zones too. And there's a lot of great science on the benefits of not eating, and there's some wonderful science on the benefits of eating a holistic diet as opposed to junk food and highly processed foods. And we can talk about that if you like, or we could skip that altogether.
Well, I am somebody who could definitely benefit from eating less food for sure. Um, it's it's a challenge. One of the things that I wanted to ask you and share any knowledge that you want about healthy food, processed food, all that is fantastic. But you chose to include gluten and dairy free recipes, which I love. I'm not allergic to dairy, but I have an intolerance. And one of the things that's frustrating is like every meal recipe that I look at, and it's like, yeah, I want to do. Oh, it's milk. Yeah, I can't do that.
Hmm. Yeah, it's such a polarizing topic and an emotional topic for a lot of people when it comes to dietary information. And I'm very cautious about what I speak into when it comes to this because everybody is on their own adventure and everybody is in their own unique health journey as well. You know, some people are thriving out there and they're eating junk food and drinking alcohol and smoking cigarettes and they live to be 100, you know, whereas others change their whole diet, go on a health kick and can still suffer disease. And health is can be a multifaceted um, issue
Hmm.
for a lot of people. You know, I see food as one of the lowest hanging fruits, pardon the pun, but I see that as something that we can control very quickly if we choose to. Yeah, and I'm not enforcing this on anybody. I would never force my opinions onto anybody. That is not who I am. However, if you are struggling with a health journey and you are considering looking at what you can do with your diet, there are some pretty simple tips. And the first one is cook your own food. uh, be aware of where that food comes from. You know,
Mm.
if you're looking, if you're going shopping and you're buying a box of something and there's 20 different ingredients on there and you can't pronounce the names or understand what those ingredients are, perhaps that's better left on the shelf. You know, my simple principle is eat real food
Hmm.
as nature intended. And if you choose to eat meat, if you can afford it, then seek out beautiful, holistically raised animals from farmers that care about their livestock. And traveling through America, there is a lot of options out there, including the good ones. It just might take a little bit of homework to find out where the good either the farmers are or the better butchers are or where you can buy your meat. So meats generally, if you can get grass-fed and finished and organic, possibly if your budget allows it, then that's great. Seafood, you can focus on wild seafood instead of the farmed seafood because obviously the wild seafood will have a more natural diet than something that humans are pellet feeding, for instance, in relation to farm foods. And then with your fruit and vegetables, nuts, seeds, and spices and so on, then it comes down to, again, a little bit of research. Do you want spray-free ingredients, spray-free vegetables and fruits? Once upon a time, that was what we only had in the last 100 years. That has changed, where we need to put a label on it that says that's organic or spray free, which is a pretty interesting first time in human history for for however
Hmm.
long we've been on this planet for. Only the last 100 years have we had non-organic food. So if we can stick to those simple principles, good quality meat and seafood, great quality fruit and vegetables, and then have that for your meals in whichever combination you choose to. Um, and then we can go into different dietary beliefs such as carnivore and paleo and keto and vegetarianism, veganism if you choose to, or we can steer clear of that if you like. But basically, going back to whole foods and cooking as much as you can, because then you know what's exactly in your food. And I like the old school method, what our great grandparents and their ancestors would have eaten, which would have been meat and veg, seafood and vegetables, and some fruit that was ripe at the time, that was seasonal, that wasn't shipped from halfway across the planet to get to you in some sort of cold storage and then in some sort of warehouse where they put gases in to either stop the ripening process or to speed them up. So just going back to natural, real food that is common sense. That's where I get to now, getting into the gluten-free and dairy-free. So this is a really interesting topic, and it might take a little bit longer to explain than I like. But as you mentioned, you don't have an allergy to dairy, and most people don't. But there seems to be some evidence out there that suggests that the dairy that we're consuming these days, being it homogenized and pasteurized, and there's many reasons for that, but that seems to have create sensitivities for quite a lot of people. Um, there is a statement out there that says 70% of the world's population is sensitive to dairy. Now, I know it's a contentious issue whether raw dairy is safe or not, or whether it's even legal in certain parts of the United States. Um, and then with the gluten-free recipes, because so much of our grain and cereal crops these days are sprayed with glyphosate and all these chemicals,
Mhm.
that seems to have created a sensitivity to these foods that we probably never used to have an issue with. So, again, it's an individual's journey to work out what they may or may not be sensitive to. Someone with great health should be able to eat everything, right? We're omnivores by definition in the dictionary, if you believe in that. So we are able to consume both animals and plants. Now, if our I wrote a whole book on this with a beautiful friend of mine called Helen Patteran, and it was called The Complete Gut Health Cookbook. And in that, what they've realized, or what the evidence is showing these days, is because our gut microbiome, which is also our second brain, where a lot of our bodily functions stem from, our mental clarity, as well as a whole host of other things. If our gut microbiome or our gut flora is out of balance, and that can be out of balance through to overuse of pharmaceutical medicines, and I'm not against pharmaceutical medicines, but people should be aware that that can throw your gut flora out of balance, such as antibiotics. And then, because of the things that are sprayed on these foods these days, if they're non organic, they can be gut disruptors.
Mhm.
So, the whole premise of why I like to promote a gluten free, dairy free diet for people on their health journey, if they are suffering from any illness, is because, from my point of view, it takes away the most common inflammatory products from our diet out for a while. We need to understand that our bodies are always wanting to heal themselves. That's the beautiful design, the intelligent wisdom of our bodies. First and foremost, heal ourselves. If we cut ourselves, our body knows how to heal it. The band aid
Mhm.
might stop a little bit of infection from outside things, but it's not the band aid that's healing us, it's our body. It forms a scab and it heals, and a week later, we're right
Bummer.
as rain. So our bodies are intelligent, and we don't give it the credit that we should. So if we can take away the inflammatory foods, if they are your inflammatory foods, gives our body a rest from having to, I guess, fight these inflammatory food sources or products. Our body goes into hyper healing mode. And then perhaps down the track, you might want to reintroduce these foods that you've taken out of your diet for a little while and then see what happens, right? And your body is intelligent. You'll know straight away whether those gluten containing grains or perhaps the dairy, if you get bloated, if you get brain fog, if you have an irritable sleep, or you get moody, perhaps that's your body telling you that maybe we'll hold off on those foods for a little bit longer until perhaps there's a time that we can reincorporate them. And for some people that have autoimmune disease, they might be better off not consuming those foods ever again.
Mhm.
And luckily, fortunately enough, there are so many other foods that we were talking about: meat, seafood, eggs,
Mhm.
if you can tolerate them, fruit and veggies, nuts, seeds, herbs, spices from all around the world that we get to play with. And it, there's a variety of different dishes, like tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands that we can create and celebrate. And they are equally as delicious. I'm telling you, I promise you, eating health food got a bad stigma once upon a time because people thought it was plastic and cardboard and had no flavor. And I can promise you, as a chef that's been on this journey for 15 years, that the food is equally as delicious, if not more delicious. And the interesting part of this is it can cost you less money to eat this way if you choose to.
Ah.
And we can talk about that if you like, or if you've got a different question, we can go down a different
No,
different potential.
you are the master here, so I'd love to, how can we save money eating healthier? It seems that everybody thinks the opposite.
Well, it's going to be interesting what happens in the United States. I mean, I wrote this book, Healthy Food for Healthy Kids, and it's published through Skyhorse Publishing, which is a fascinating publishing house, and I have to thank them wholeheartedly. And it is through the work of the Children's Health Defence that this came about, and that, if you're not aware of Children's Health Defence, that was set up by Bobby Kennedy Jr.,
Mhm.
who is in the news at the moment pretty
Mhm.
much 24 hours a day. And no matter what you think about Bobby, he's definitely had a very colourful life, you know, and that's an understatement.
Yeah.
And I've been a friend with Bobby's for quite a long time now, and what I believe about this man is that he wants to make America healthy again, and that's not a bad thing to be championing. If um, yeah, I don't think that's a bad thing at all. So, how do we eat cheaper? Right. So this comes down to if you're willing to go on the adventure or not.
Mhm.
And that really is the the crux of this. Because as you know, some of these foods are very expensive. The prime cuts of meat and the beautiful seafood that is seen in top restaurants around the world. There are luxury items that we can choose to consume, and then there's budget healthy foods that we can choose to consume too. So if we take seafood, for instance, there is very expensive seafood that you can buy, and then there's not as expensive budget seafood, as I would like to call it. It's how do we change our perception if we already think that the budget seafood or the lesser cuts of meat, such as hamburger, um, ground beef, for instance, or offal or organ meats,
Mhm.
is not something that I'm prepared to entertain in my life, or sardines, or anchovies, or squid, or mussels, or all of these things that chefs love to play with, like we do. You go to a French restaurant, they've got organ meats on the menu. If you go to Spain, they've got organ meats, they've got sardines, they've got mussels. If you go to South America, different parts of the world, they celebrate these culinary items that over the last 50 years, 40 years in Western countries have sort of been put to the back burner, so to speak. And some are really difficult to find these days in your local supermarket or grocery store or butcher because they haven't been sought out.
Mhm.
But these are the foods that you can buy that I've actually got some lamb's liver defrosting right now, and that's going to be my breakfast after we do this
Oh.
podcast. And I'll tell you the story because I think this might resonate with your viewers and maybe even yourself, Jed,
Mhm.
is that I was one of the fussiest children that I ever came across. And I think it annoyed my mum. for a very long time. I was so fussy. I didn't want to eat mushrooms. I didn't want to eat oysters. I didn't want to eat all the icky foods, the liver that I just spoke about, or the brains, or any of these exotic types of ingredients. And then I became a chef. And to become a chef, I was 17. I had to do my apprenticeship. And one of my greatest fears was going down the path to try these foods and cook these foods and then appreciate these foods. Like I couldn't think of anything worse as a 17-year-old than eating an oyster or a mussel or mushrooms or cooking liver or bone marrow or heart or kidneys or anything like this. You know what my favorite foods are now?
What? Tell
All of
me.
the ones that I just mentioned, the ones that I had the greatest fear and dread over eating. And it didn't happen overnight. I will tell you the truth. It wasn't just like I ate an oyster one day or I ate a kidney one day or some bone marrow. I was like, yep, that's delicious. I had to train myself both emotionally, mentally, psychologically, as well as develop my palate to be able to appreciate these foods. And it did take perseverance. I'm not going to lie to you. It does take time. And anyone that's got as a parent who has a child and you're introducing new foods for them, same thing. There's a study out there that says for children that are very fussy over certain types of food, a lot of parents will give up after the second or third try because the child uh, retaliates against new foods being offered to them. But the study states that after the 15th, 16th, 17th time of inviting the child to experience that food, finally they will open up and go along on the adventure, and that becomes a new part of their diet. So did it take me that long? Probably that long myself, 10, 15 times to learn to appreciate oysters, 10, 15
Uh-huh.
times to appreciate these different organ meats. And I'm not saying that you have to eat organ meats, and I'm not saying that you have to eat oysters. Oysters are expensive at the moment. They used to be very, very cheap. That we go through these cycles of what's expensive, what's cheap. And hopefully we'll go through another cycle where some of these beautiful foods will lessen in price for us. So in saying that, ground meat or ground beef is a wonderful cheap alternative for people to put into their diets, and sausages or um, these types of budget friendly foods. And my wife and I, we eat sausages once or twice a week. We'll eat beautiful ground beef or ground lamb or ground pork once or twice a week as well. And we don't do it mainly because it's cheap. We do it because there's so much variety that we can get out of these types of different cuts of meat and infuse flavors. As I was talking about before, we've got a plethora of different ingredients that we can flavor these dishes with. And if you look at ground beef, for instance, you've got Mexican, South American, you've got Italian, you've got Russian, you've got obviously the United States versions of these wonderful dishes. The on and on and on. So that talks about the price point. But here's the kicker of all of this. I generally once, maybe twice a day, and I don't snack. They're just one big, beautiful meal or two generous sized meals per day. And I fill my plate with either meat or seafood and then some sort of veg on the side. Sometimes not even a vegetable on the side. Sometimes I'll just eat 5 sausages and that will be it with some pickles or some sauerkraut on the plate or some sauce. I'm not too fussy. I don't want to spend too long in the kitchen. So what happens, I promoted I still do promote a dietary principle called paleo slash ketogenic. And ketogenic basically means using fat as our primary source of fuel. Human beings are quite unique. We can use glucose and sugars or carbohydrates to fuel our bodies, but we can also use ketones or fat and protein to fuel our bodies. Now, the research suggests that we run more efficiently on ketones. And the way that we do that is we lower our carbohydrate intake because most Western nations have a very, very high carbohydrate intake. And that is due to the dietary guidelines. It's also due to these foods being very cheap and longevity. They're very shelf stable, a lot of these cereals and grains, as you know. Um, but if we go back in time, our great grandparents, they were eating pretty much a paleo ketogenic approach because they'd be eating nose to tail, they'd be eating seasonal vegetables and not gorging down on potato chips and cookies and cakes and chocolate and the like. So when we're in a state of what's called ketosis and people can cycle in and out of it, it's called being metabolically adapted. But when we lower our carbohydrates, increase our protein and fat, what happens is we become satiated very quickly. Satiated means content, a
Hmm.
feeling of fullness. And we all know the story of having a packet of cookies or donuts in front of us or a tub of ice cream, and we just eat that thing until we stop, until it's gone. Very difficult to do on the other side of the coin. Very difficult to overeat ground hamburger rissoles or patties. Very difficult to overeat just sausages on the plate or seafood on the plate because we get satiated. There's a belief out there that says the reason that people overeat is because they're craving nutrition. And when they have a high carbohydrate diet and processed foods, they're not getting the nutrition they need, which is why I believe the calorie um, principle that's out there about how many calories we should be eating it per day is a myth. And there's documentaries that have been created on this and wonderful books that talk about the calorie myth. So if we take the perception that most Western people that are inflamed and overweight aren't getting the nutrition they need, it just makes sense that they're constantly hungry,
Hmm.
and that's why a lot of people struggle losing weight or releasing their weight because they're hungry,
Yeah.
right? Whereas when people adopt this style of eating, and I used to have a 10-week program where I had 100,000 people do it. You know what the most common question or query was?
What?
Usually about week 3 or 4 of people lowering their carbohydrates, increasing their healthy fat and protein. The most common question is, I've woken up and for the first time in my life, I'm not hungry. I don't want to eat breakfast. Is there something wrong with me? Because for 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years, because of that habit of eating breakfast in the morning, maybe morning tea, lunch, afternoon tea, dinner, snacks, um, they're so used to eating 4, 5, 6, 7 times a day. Whereas all of a sudden, these people that were in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, they would they would be a little concerned because their hunger was gone in the morning. And I'd be like, no, 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 that's perfectly normal. You'll probably end up eating twice a day, or 3 times a day, or once a day. It's up to
Hmm.
you. Listen to your body. Your body will tell you. But when you're fueling it right, as I said, so the great analogy, sorry if I'm going on a rant here, but the great analogy I was taught about this keto and high carbohydrate approach, the two different fuels we can use, is like if you light a fire. If you've ever lit a fire, we'll use the analogy that the kindling, the small pieces of wood,
Hmm.
is like the carbohydrates. Now, if you wanted to light a fire and keep that fire going, and all you had to use was the kindling or the small bits of wood and twigs and sticks, you would have to stand over that fire all day long to keep it going because the kindling or the twigs would burn very rapidly, lose their heat. You've got to throw more on there to keep that fire going. Now, anyone that's built a fire knows that once the fire's going, what you want to do is stack big, fat logs onto the fire. And then what happens is that fire will burn nice and slowly for a long period of time, and you don't need to keep stocking the wood onto the fire as often as you would with the kindling. So that's the great analogy between a high carbohydrate diet and I guess a higher fat diet with good quality protein is we're using those big fat logs. And what that enables us to do is go through our normal day without throwing too many logs on the fire, without eating too much, good quality. And that what happens then instead of our blood sugars going up and down, which can cause metabolic disease and chronic illness, which we're witnessing all through the Western world now, it's an epidemic. What that enables us to do is lower our blood sugar spikes, and we sort of go through these nice, instead of these ups and downs or highs and lows, we have this beautiful calmness that starts to permeate not only our physical world, but also our emotional state. So we don't have these sugar highs and sugar lows or crashes, and 3 o'clock in the afternoon we're struggling to stay awake, or mid-morning we're struggling to stay awake. And I'll give you a great example. It's midday here in Australia. I've been surfing this. I had a very early podcast with America at 4:30 a.m. my time. Then
Mm.
I went for a surf for 2 hours this morning, and I'm back here. It's midday. I haven't eaten anything today, and I'm not hungry, but I am going to fuel myself after this chat with that delicious meal. I'm going to do some liver and some eggs, and that will sustain me till tonight, till I catch the plane and go see my daughters. So that's how we can save money, by
Uh-huh.
looking at the different foods and being open to exploring different foods for us. And then number two is there's the potential, and I believe it is a very real potential, that we start to eat uh, as frequently. And we're not spending the money on those multinational food corporations. And no disrespect to them, they're an industry, it's a business. I do
Mhm.
not like to see any businesses go out of business, but we have a choice whether to consume that types of food, or whether we're going to consume something a little bit more natural without the 20 ingredients that have been very scientifically um, designed for us to be addicted to them and to overeat them and overconsume them and think about them a lot. So there's
Well,
a big mouthful for you.
well, I love it, and I this has been a fascinating conversation, and because you're sharing so much great information, and we're I think parents are very much aware that social media has been designed to get our kids addicted and to lock them in so that the kids don't put down the social media. And to hear you talk about how, some of these foods have been engineered the same way social media's been engineered to keep us hungry, to keep us going back buying more. And I hope I'm not misinterpreting what you've said, but I think that's a really important lesson for parents to hear.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And again, I don't want to change anybody's mind. I'm just planting some seeds if you
Sure,
want to
yeah.
go on the adventure to learn a little bit more. One of my deepest beliefs is the free will for everybody to live their life as they choose.
Mhm.
And if this resonates with your listeners and viewers, great. If it doesn't
Excellent.
resonate, also great.
That's
And it's always here to explore. And I believe in total freedom, and which is probably why I'm with Skyhorse and working with Bobby Kennedy Jr. Or thankful for him to making this happen for me, and for the parents out there. And you know, a very controversial topic. But a lot of the people that have followed or that are a part of the Children's Health Defence that have supported them and are part of that, so I guess, movement or platform, they're looking for solutions and answers for their children, because a lot of the children and families that are a part of that have some pretty major health issues that they're looking for the best ways in which they can enrich their child's life, right? And so I'm very grateful to be able to share this body of work with those parents, and for any family that is looking for healthy solutions to incorporate into their family's lifestyle. Because having a loved one, or especially a child that is going through some battles and some challenges, um, it's tragic, and it can be harrowing for the whole family. And you know my my deepest intention is for everybody to thrive, not just survive, but to thrive. And I have a firm belief that as we age, it isn't a downhill slope. I'm turning 52 this this year in a few months, and I'm in the best physical, mental state that I've ever been in my life. And I eat well. I go out into nature, and my belief on getting older is not that we deteriorate. We don't lose our faculties if we choose not to, but it does take a little bit of intention setting as
Mhm.
to how we choose to live our lives, you know. And um, my goal is to die of old age without having Alzheimer's, without having dementia, with having all my mental faculties still working, so that I can keep the memories, those beautiful memories of my children, till the day that I die. And for my body to be flexible, to be strong for as long as it possibly can. And there's great evidence out there that we can do that as human beings and then die peacefully in our old age, whatever that may be, you know, whether it's in our 80s, 90s, hundreds, 110s, because it has been proven that it can be done. That's my intention. Because I do not want to be a burden on my family or my children or my grandchildren down the track, and I believe there are solutions that are out there for us to be able to live this way without being fanatical about it.
Mhm.
You know?
Mhm.
I don't count calories, I don't count carbohydrates. I cook delicious food. I spend time in nature. I'm very careful with what you were talking about, social media, what I watch, what I've refused to watch, or get called into. I'm a little bit more emotionally detached from the world going on, but I do find it quite mesmerizing and entertaining without being drawn in too much. But you know, we do have the information out there for us to, one, I believe, reverse most of our chronic illness out there. And I will say that, you know, I do believe that most of this chronic health is completely preventable as well. I've interviewed wonderful doctors over the years, especially in the fields of Alzheimer's and dementia, and they do believe that it's 100% preventable if we're willing to do have some simple changes in our life. And you know, those simple changes can be delicious. They don't have to be anything that we need to fear, unless it is the fear of trying something new, you know, whether it is some of these more alternative foods, so to speak. But that can be such a great adventure to step out of our comfort zone. And maybe once a month, we're going to go, you know what? I'm going to go to the butcher and order some grass-fed or some organic chicken livers, and I'm going to make a French pate, you know. And there are non-dairy versions of pate that you can get online for free if you choose to. I've got them in my book as well. Um, and that could be such a beautiful adventure where you get to do that with the family, and they all go on the adventure, and it might
Yeah.
not be palatable the first time, but it definitely won't be disgusting.
Well, I love it. And it sounds like healthy food for healthy kids is a great way to start that adventure, great way to start some great conversations with our kids, get them thinking um, in terms of get them to think about the choices that they're making and be aware of what they're fueling their body with. And I feel like I just spent an hour in a master class, and I'm glad this is recorded because I get to go back and listen to it and you know relearn from it. I know that and I think we could talk for 2 or 3 hours, but you'll get sick of me very soon. Where can we go to find out more, not only about healthy food for healthy kids, but also find out more about you?
You can Google healthy food for healthy kids. I think it's on the Skyhorse Publishing website and Amazon, wherever children's health defense books are allowed to be sold. So I'm not sure. I'm doing a tour in the United States in March, so we'll see if
Okay.
there's any in the bookstores, but definitely online. And it comes out February the 11th. For people that want to find out more about myself, I am on Instagram, Chef Pete Evans. You can check me out there. And I've just recently joined X as Pete Evans or Chef Pete Evans X. I have a very small following there because I only joined a couple of weeks ago. X is new to me, so
Mhm.
Twitter is new to me. So I'm going on that adventure, you know, stepping out of my comfort zone into another social media adventure. But I've got 30 cookbooks previous to this one as well that are available. They're collector's items now, that are available. Oh, sorry, my dog's coming up for
That's
a,
okay.
just for a lick.
Cutie.
Um, um, they're available online as well if you type in Pete Evans. And if anybody wants to learn a little bit more in a different way, and I'm sorry to do this because I do love the
Oh,
book format, and I'm a huge fan of books, and which is why I write so many of them. I do have a documentary that I created 7 years ago called The Magic Pill, which I think is on Amazon Prime and a few other streaming services. And that's a 90-minute documentary which basically talked about that analogy of the fire and the ketogenic paleo approach. And I think people might find that palatable and interesting.
huh?
But again, healthy food for healthy kids. And the healthy food for healthy kids also has babies, toddlers, and food for the whole family. It's not just for children. Like if you're an adult, no children, there's some great recipes in there for you too.
Well, I'm looking to check it out. You also have a podcast, right?
I do. It's called Evolve. I've conducted 500 interviews. Most have been about long-term regenerative health, the different tools that we have available to us. I mean, and food is one of them. Obviously, spending time in nature, good quality water, surrounding yourself with wildlife or pets. They're great for longevity for
Mhm.
sure. Um, and so many different things. But yeah, my podcast has been a joy. I've learned so much and had some beautiful guests. And yeah, it's I just want to thank you, Jed. This has been a beautiful conversation. Thank you for allowing me to connect with not only yourself but your listeners and viewers. And just want to tell you I love you, brother, and love to everybody that's taken the time to stick around to the end. And thank you so much. And
Pete,
as my food says, food is medicine. It can definitely be, and it potentially can be a form of, I guess, non-medicine too. Depends
yeah.
on what we choose to have.
We've had a fascinating time speaking to the author of Healthy Food for Healthy Kids. Our guest has been Pete Evans. Pete, from the bottom of my heart, thanks for being on the show.
Cheers, brother. Thank you.